Hello, BookTube. I was gone for a while. I had a guest here at Hyde Cottage, so I was watching a lot less BookTube and responding to virtually no BookTube. I was making virtually no videos. It feels weird to me to make a whole barrage of videos while I get a guest sitting right there, even if the guest is okay with it. Instead, we had all sorts of other stuff. Playing around with the books, getting new books, fussing with the bean, going for walks. So it didn't feel right to do. So I'm at a little bit of a backlog, and some of the videos that I want to respond to, I'm responding to later than usual. And one of those was by iSamwise, a channel that I've praised on this channel before. I will leave a link to the particular video. He did a video on his top 10 favorite science fiction novels. Not a video estimating the best science fiction novels, but his top 10 favorites. And it was wonderful. It's an absolutely wonderful video. I was praising it while David Murphy, my guest, was here. I was praising it because I watched a bunch of videos, BookTube videos that day that I thought were just the quintessence of what is best about BookTube. I also shocked a lot of you during that week because David did a vlog of our trip to the book barn in Niantic, Connecticut, and that vlog revealed that I have legs. That there's actually Steve below the camera. A lot of you had your moral worldviews shocked by that fact. I've always wondered how you think I get to the brattle if I don't have legs. But anyway, where was I? Oh, right. iSamwise made this video, and I saw it and immediately wanted to respond to it with a list of my own favorite science fiction novels. And I'm going to do that now with a whole bunch of digressions. So, because his video had a lot of digressions too. It's just a wonderful, wonderful video. I want to go over his choices first. Because his choices, in addition to being really interesting, were also a perfect demonstration of what BookTube does best. As I have said many, many times, in my opinion, BookTube at its best is this vast chatterhouse of book talk. Some of it may be directed, some of it may not be. Some of it may be intentionally aimed at convincing you to try something. Others might not. It might not be trying to convince you of anything, but suddenly you are convinced because this person that you have come to know through their videos, so a pure parasocial relationship, this person that you've come to know through their videos is enthusing about this thing, and now that you've watched 20 or 30 or 50 of their videos, or 1,000 of their videos, or 9,000 of their videos, now that you've watched enough of that to get a baseline of who they are and what they like and don't like, if they enthuse about something just privately, not completely private because they're on camera, but if they're enthusing about something, just because I read it this week and oh boy was it good, the two things that I really liked about it are this and this, they're not trying to make a case for it to you, but you're going to pay extra attention to that anyway because you're thinking, you and I don't always agree, but it sounds like the way you're describing this thing makes me want to try it. I love that aspect of BookTube. It's almost inadvertent. I think it's an emergent property of just so many people chattering about books all day long. It's the exact thing that so many people who make BookTube channels cite as their reason for doing so. That I don't have that in my real life at all. And I do have it in my real life, but not to the extent of BookTube. That's for sure. So I want to go over his choices first, just to let you know what they are, just in case you don't check his video out before you watch this one. He starts off with Ian Tregillis' book, The Mechanical, which was a really interesting choice. His list was full of interesting choices. We saw that on this channel. I got an advanced copy of it and read it. I didn't make it as much of it as he did, and true to form, he makes me want to reread it. Then he mentioned 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Naturally, I agree. I absolutely love 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I was curious to know, in his video, iSamwise he's a great BookTube channel. He's very young. And he's American. And I maybe it's unfair of me, but I'm combining those two details to assume that he has never read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in the original. So I was kind of curious to know where he has read it. But even in a bad translation, and keep in mind, famously, there is a bad translation of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. There is a good one, and I think it and its clones are now in the majority. I think if you just randomly pick a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea English language translation in a bookstore, you're more likely to get a good one than the bad one, unless it's a used bookstore. But anyway, even in a bad translation, it entranced the whole English-speaking world. So I loved that. I love that was on his list. Then he picked the Book of the Long Sun by Gene Wolfe because He is BookTube's unofficial pope of Gene Wolfe. And then he picked the one book on his list that I think will raise the highest number of eyebrows. And that is The Revenge of the Sith, the novelization of the movie The Revenge of the Sith by Matthew Stover. He's mentioned this book before, and it blew me out of my seat when I heard him mention it the first time, because I honestly thought I was the only one in the country who read that thing. I got it from a publisher. I read it when it came out, and I remember thinking, this is one of the most remarkable Star Wars novels that I've ever read. Not only does it not read like most Star Wars novels, which are, let's face it, a little bad, but also certainly doesn't read like any movie adaptations. Those are usually awful. Even when they're done by old hands, they're usually awful. They don't have any creativity in them at all. iSamwise is quite correct. The novelization of The Revenge of the Sith, I know you don't believe me, but the novelization of The Revenge of the Sith is terrific. It is absolutely terrific as a reading experience. Anyway, his next was The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers. This was very, very pleasing to me personally to see on his list. Very happy to see that there. Then he went on to A Canticle for Leibowitz. This was fascinating to me to see on his list for a number of reasons. It's a great novel in any list of the top 50 science fiction novels of all time. It will certainly be on there. But also, it struck me because one of the elements of iSamwise's channel, he doesn't parade it around in neon letters, which makes it all the more real and all the more interesting, is that he himself is religiously faithful and is fascinated by religions in fantasy and science fiction. Some of the discussions he's had with authors on his channel, he is terrific at discussing things with authors on his channel, and some of the best of those have been hashing over these particular subjects. I think in this particular video of his, you could probably tell he's a religious mind frame, because at one point he says, what was it? The dividing line between science fiction and fantasy is practically non-existent. Which, yes, that would be true, I suppose. If you lived in a religious mindset, you might say that. I don't think that's true. The dividing line between science fiction and fantasy, I think, is as broad and wide as a highway. Science fiction is based in materialism. No ghosts need apply. Now, there can be bad science fiction where the science presented is terrible. I think you'll hear of the J.J. Abrams lens flare Star Trek movies that suddenly introduced self-transporters, where you didn't need a point A and a point B. You could transport yourself somewhere else. That is just magical teleportation. That is not even remotely possible. So, whereas a transporter, there are all sorts of books about the science of Star Trek that talk about something like it. But that is just J.J. Abrams not caring, which was a hallmark of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies. I just don't care about this sort of thing. I'm just here to tell a good story. And then his lens flare movies gave rise to Alex Kurtzman's New Trek, that was just here to not care about science and tell a good story. Only let's remove telling the good story part and just not care about science. So you can have engines not attached to a starship that they power. But anyway, I think that's the dividing line between science fiction and fantasy, is that science fiction is built on what could be and fantasy isn't, because there's no magic in the world. But if you are a religious mind frame, then you do believe there's magic in the world. So I guess his proclamation makes perfect sense for him. But anyway, then he moved on to Dune, of course, Frank Herbert's Dune, widely regarded as the greatest science fiction novel ever written. Then he did the Sun Eater series by Christopher Ruocchio. Now, Christopher Ruocchio, iSamwise has one foot firmly planted in the Lothlorien of BookTube, in the gated community of FantasyTube, where they don't want outsiders, they don't ever read anything outside their genre, and they all love Christopher Ruocchio. Partially, personally, I mean, he's perfectly happy to show up on their channels and talk with them and whatnot, and they love the Sun Eater series. I don't share. I'm not part of that community. They don't want me. And also, I don't share that adulation. To me, the Sun Eater series seems like fairly standard Ron Goulart-style space opera. Good and solid, but not all that great. But keep in mind, we're not talking about the 10 greatest science fiction novels here, or series. We're talking about iSamwise's favorites. And I need to stress that because some of mine aren't going to pass muster when it comes to greatness. So I wanted to stress that here. Then we move on to the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis, but he chooses particularly one book in that trilogy. And I could have listened to him talk for an hour. I do not like the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. It strikes me as pure condescension. From beginning to end, someone who does not care about this and is only vamping it for extracurricular reasons. Obviously, iSamwise does not feel that way and does not see that. I think he would know perfectly well if an author were condescending to him, and he doesn't feel that when he reads the Space Trilogy. And what does that do? Well, maybe in the critical world, if we were talking about, the latest Jonathan Franzen novel, that would produce a reaction in me. But in this little corner of BookTube, the reaction it produces in me is, well, he's a sensitive reader, and if he doesn't feel condescended to, maybe there is no condescension here. Maybe I'm the one at fault, and maybe I should go back to the Space Trilogy. That's exactly what it made me think. And his number one pick, because keep in mind, in all top 10 lists, the others can jumble all they want, but number one is number one. Okay. And his number one was The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, because he can't get enough of Gene Wolfe. One of the fascinating things I feel about top 10 lists like this is that favorite lists like this, favorite authors like this, one of the things that I find most fascinating about BookTube is that a lot of BookTubers are, and I don't mean this as condescension, okay, so don't get carried away, but a lot of BookTubers are young. And a lot of BookTubers have not read a lot. Which is why iSamwise says that his own list will be different next year. So it used to be, when I started on BookTube, it was a little strange to me when someone would say so-and-so is my favorite author, and the next sentence out of the mouth would be, I haven't read everything by so-and-so. I guess in the old pre-BookTube world of books that I knew, those two things wouldn't go together. You wouldn't say that someone was your favorite author unless you'd read everything they've written, including their letters, autobiographies, that sort of thing. That's not true anymore, and I don't mind that it's not true. That we're talking about impressions here. We're talking about whether or not you really get along with an author on the page. So anyway, that was iSamwise's list. I loved it. I will leave a link to his video. And I want to give my own list of my favorite science fiction novels. And like him, this list could change next year. I want to start, my list is different from his. It's a little more traditional, obviously, because I don't think he's 28 yet. The first one I want to start with is Alfred Koppel, and this is the first book in a series, but it wasn't intended to be. Koppel was an old stager, an old hand hack. He wrote good novels, but he didn't write this book thinking it would be a series. It just took off with fans, including me. And it's Glory, with this great mass market paperback cover, it has a spaceship with an amazing crew of semi-alien beings on board, and a captain on board, and a disputed mission, and a planet that is disputing their authority and all. So it has the trappings of a standard space opera. It's done really well. It's written really well. But the undertone here is what makes it remarkable, because the undertone, all science fiction, all good science fiction, looks a little at reality in order to ask its what-if questions. It doesn't mimeograph that reality. Bad science fiction takes Twitter grievances and puts them on the page unchanged. Bad science fiction does that. Good science fiction changes and warps and nuances things, and the background implication in this book is apartheid South Africa. And one of the niche planets involved in this novel has held on to it. It's exported and held on to apartheid and doesn't want that to change. And oh my, oh boy, is it done well. In addition to everything else. I mean, if it were only that, it would be bad. It would be preachy science fiction, but it does everything else well too. So this is on my list. Then we move to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Here's an overlap between me and iSamwise. If you do a list, I want you to have an overlap too. You thought my overlap was going to be Dune. You were wrong. I know that Dune is a better book than 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is so lunging and adolescent and hysterical, but I love it. I absolutely love it. I suspect, despite the discrepancies in our age, that iSamwise and I love this book for the same reason. Because it got us good and early. Was the air we breathed for a long time as readers. I think that might be true. I love it. I absolutely love it. What can I say? Then we'll move on to a lot of these books I mentioned on this channel before. This is by David Brin. It came out as a mass market paperback. I read the mass market paperback on a spinner rack. Got it from a spinner rack in a drugstore. Brought it back to a balcony in Iowa. Read it in just a burst. And I remember thinking, I didn't write it down anywhere. There were no internet then. I didn't tell anybody. But I'm telling you, Scout's honor, I thought at the time, this is going to win every award that isn't nailed to the floor. And it did. It's Startide Rising, which has so much world building in it that is not dumped on you that, oh my God, it hits the ground running and never stops. Never stops even to catch its breath. This is an amazing future story in which, as you can see, dolphins have been bioengineered. They have been uplifted, is what it's called. Boosted a little in their eloquence, boosted a little in their manual dexterity, boosted a little in their ability to communicate and understand humans. And the future world here is one in which a Congress of alien races judges whether or not a new alien race is worthy of joining their community by whether or not that race has uplifted other species. In this story, humans have uplifted dolphins and chimpanzees. And so they are admitted into this union of races as very junior partners. Some of these races are millions of years old. And the crew of a starship called Streaker, a scrappy little starship that has chimps on board, humans on board, dolphins on board. The corridors are full of water. And the captain is a dolphin, Captain Krydaki. And they uncover an artifact, a mummy. And its ramifications could unseat the settled order of all of that alien Congress. And so that all the renegade members of that alien Congress are gunning for this starship, which has to run for its life. And that is all this book is. It's just the adventures of Streaker, of the starship, as it runs for its life. And the unusual thing, they get almost shut down over a planet that has very metallic oceans. The dolphins can breathe it, but it's not easy on anybody. They want to set about repairs. They want to figure out their next move. They want to figure out whether or not they can avoid these much more powerful alien armadas that are after them. But the planet has mysteries of its own that are going to help with unsettling things. It's amazing. Just amazing. And the thing that's so wonderful about it is that it doesn't have any fat on it at all. You have to just pay attention. There is a kind of a book that comes before it called Sundiver. Kinda, sorta. It isn't a prequel in any way. You do not need to read any book before you read Startide Rising. And you don't need to listen to anybody who tells you do. Sundiver is a very different kind of book, and it has one bit in it that is narratively carried along throughout the whole book that really pays off at the end. Oh my God, talk about a gut punch. But it's a tiny little thing. It's mostly an adventure story. Anyway, let's move on to this, Intervention by Julian May. Julian May wrote the Pliocene Exile trilogy, and then it became a tetralogy or 4 books. And in that series, a future Earth discovers a one-way time portal to the Pliocene epoch, and some people want to take it. They're sick of their modern world. And in that modern world, in the backdrop to the Pliocene Exile series, humans have developed not only are they members of an intergalactic group, but they've also developed latent superpowers. It turns out most humans have latent superpowers of 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 varieties that roughly correspond to astral projection or mental telepathy or telekinesis. Julian May gives them different names, and the correspondences aren't exact, but by the time the humans join this in the Pliocene Exile trilogy, by the time the humans join this race, plenty of them have developed powers like that. That is part of the reason why the alien Congress even notices Earth, is because humans have achieved meta status. And this book is a prequel. This book is about one particular family in whom runs a strong genetic disposition to those superpowers. But they're in rural New Hampshire in the 20th century, just going about their lives, going about their days. Plaid work shirts, take the truck to the factory, have babies, have French-Canadian aunts, whatnot. So it's a wonderful combination of the real world and these emerging superpowers. These are characters that in the Pliocene Exile books are already legendary, or are already dead, or in one case, our main narrator are very old. Here, they're young people, and they don't know what's going on. Earth has not yet encountered these aliens. Humans have not yet reached Metaconcert, so they have not yet come to the attention of these aliens, and there are a whole bunch of forces on Earth that don't want them to. And it's just, I love it. I love it. I'm not saying it's great. Remember, these are your favorites. When it comes to favorites, I'm talking about the ones that not only have I read more often or reread more often, but that I just love more. I love visiting them more than I do other books that I know are better books. So Intervention by Julian May. Then we move on to The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester. This is a weird novel, as all of Bester's novels are. Bester was a foundational science fiction writer, and he wrote a whole bunch of workaday, 5 cents a word science fiction hack for the periodicals. His short stories are terrific to read. But when he was weird, he was really weird. People always say, they always tell me that my legendary dislike for Philip K. Dick arises from the fact that he's a weird author and you just don't like weird authors. Not true. That is not true. I can prove that it's not true, in whether it's in contemporary fiction. You say I don't like weird authors. Well, I like Dennis Cooper. I love Thomas Pynchon. Obviously, you're wrong there. I like weird stuff when it's well done. And Philip K. Dick couldn't write his way out of a wet paper bag. Alfred Bester is a weird author. This is a weird book. The more you read it, the more weird you think it is. And we're not even talking about Stars My Destination and his later novels that are just psycho trips. This is, I think, his most coherent novel. It is widely considered his masterpiece. It also would be on that top 50 science fiction list. And it deals with a man who's slowly but surely having his consciousness peeled away from him. It also has telepaths in a future society. Don't really know about this cover. I would kill to have my old mass market paperback back with this cover. This was not the dust jacket of the hardcover. This was the paperback original that was a Timescape paperback here in America. And there are parts of this novel that will just stick with you, even though you're not 100% sure, even on your 10th reading, what exactly is going on. Tensor, said the tensor. Tensor, said the tensor. Tension, apprehension, and dissension have begun. Still, had to be on my list because I love it. Then, Dune. No. God Emperor of Dune. This is the fourth in Frank Herbert's Dune series. This is drastically different from the first three, which take place in the events of one lifetime. This takes place thousands of years later than the end of Children of Dune. And those 1,000 years, everyone from Dune has, of course, long since died, as of all their generations, except for one character who has stayed alive and has been steadily mutating from a human into a giant sandworm, but without losing his consciousness, without losing his human intellect. And this is a little story, basically a little story about that God Emperor, about that incredible tyrant who has been in power for thousands of years. And I love it. I just love it. Now, if we were talking about best science fiction novels, and then of course I would echo iSamwise and I would put Dune on this list. But we're not. We're talking about your favorite science fiction novels, and for good or ill, I love God Emperor more than I do Dune. So it had to be on this list. I think it's incredible. Then we have, again, this is going to be another perfect example. We have Ursula Le Guin. This is her novel, The Lathe of Heaven. And again, if we were talking about best science fiction, well, then this would be The Dispossessed or The Left Hand of Darkness. I'm perfectly willing to admit that. But we're not. We're talking about your favorite science fiction, and this has always worked on me more than anything that any science fiction that Le Guin has written. She's written fantasy that I really like. But this works on me more than any science fiction. Although you could easily say that in this case, iSamwise's loosey-goosey pronouncement is true. Anyway, that this is fantasy. You could easily say that. I don't think so. I think it falls neatly. It has aliens. I guess I'll use that as a ledge to cling to. This is about a man whose dreams change reality. But his dreams are involuntary, and he doesn't know what they're going to be, and he can't control them any more than you or I can. But they do change reality. If they're powerful enough, they change reality. And because he knows that something's wrong every morning when he wakes up, he goes to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist gradually realizes that this is not a fantasy, that this patient is the ultimate imaginable weapon. The scientist starts, I would use this ring to do good. He starts with good intentions, but there is a reality underlying it all. Underlying not only that psychiatrist's desire to change the world, but George Orwell's ability to do so. There's a horrifying reality underneath it all that you get to slowly in the course of the book. I love it. It's not a long book, but I love it. Let's see here. Then we have James Tiptree, and this is Up the Walls of the World. This is, again, the mass market paperback cover, which I do not have. I would give anything to find this old mass market, even though by this point it would probably be too frail to read. This is the story of a vast, almost Thanos-like evil that is approaching all the inhabited worlds, and it's affecting them all differently. There are humans involved here. There are also, as you can see, giant phosphorescent manta rays of a kind. And the mass market, and the American dust jacket for the hardcover of this has Tifanel, the main alien character, as just a blob. I like it better as a giant manta ray. It almost feels that way, and the society, Tifanel's society, is wonderful. She is a terrific character, an amazingly realized character who is not in any way human. And some of the action involved here, especially in the conclusion, is a little bit on the cheesy side, a little bit on the primary color side. There's a whole lot more complexity in, for instance, Brightness Falls from the Air, another novel by this author. But we're talking about favorites, and I have been to this thing so many times. So many times. It had to be on the list. Then we can move on to John Barnes. This is his book, A Million Open Doors. Again, that is the mass market paperback cover that, again, I do not have. What I would love to find these things and have them, even though I don't think I could read them. But this is the story of a wonderful Bravo planet, full of high-spirited people who talk philosophy over supper, but who are perfectly willing to slit your throat over an insult, and who have their own wonderfully described society. And it is implied there are plenty of planets like that with their own societies. But then, faster-than-light gateways start to make it possible for the whole of civilization to start immediately accessing these worlds. So this is basically, I mean, it's a lot more than that. There is a terrific personal plotline that is at the heart of this book. But the background gimmick is, imagine Star Trek without the Prime Directive. Imagine what would happen if all those primitive or less than primitive or more advanced planets that the Enterprise encounters had to just fend for themselves against the Federation or with the Federation. Imagine if that were true in a largely peaceful universe, so that you don't have just Klingons conquering everything. What would you do with the culture clashes? How would you write a book about the culture clashes? I think, like Glory, this thing had a couple of sequels because I think it was pretty successful. And I don't know that I've read those sequels any more than I don't think I've read any of Glory's sequels. But the original book, it is bursting with ideas, just bursting with them. And a wonderful, wonderful prose line. This writer can really write. Not always. Some of his books, his talents conspicuously desert him. But he's on point in this thing from start to finish. And then we can deal with my number one. And keep in mind, number one should be number one. The others can mix around all they want. But number one should be your favorite. Of all your favorite science fiction novels. And here, when we're talking not only about the thing that warms my heart the most, but probably the thing that I have read the most, it would be this. It would be A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Now, I think iSamwise even raises the question, is this really science fiction? I think it certainly is. There's no explanation given. This is the adventure of an Earthman named John Carter, who is on death's doorstep when he is mysteriously transported to the planet Mars. Barsoom, as the Martians call it. And it's not the dead, barren, freezing cold, radiation-stripped planet that we know it is. Instead, it's an alternate world. It's hot, it's dry, and it's full of exotic peoples. And John Carter himself, when he gets there, is also exotic, because as an Earthman, on Mars' lighter gravity, he is superpowered. He can leap gigantic distances, he's much stronger than he looks. He's also a master, from his time on Earth, a master swordsman. And the Barsoom novels, it started with this one, A Princess of Mars. It started serialized as Under the Moons of Mars. Fans loved it, went crazy about it 100 years ago. So I wasn't one of them, okay, as long as we're clear on that. Fans loved it, so Burroughs made it into a book and then made sequels. And it's true that in the novels, the way that humans get to Barsoom, two of them do, is never explained. But it's not a spaceship or anything. In other words, John Carter is transported. He falls on his face on Earth and wakes up on Mars. And it's not really explained, but it definitely is him. Physically him. That is not explained, but Barsoom is governed by science fiction. One of the first invented worlds by a human that is governed by consistent laws of science fiction. This was a world-building novel for science fiction, even though science fiction snobs don't like to admit it. This Mars has atmosphere plants. It has ships that fly through the air, but through physics. That is, at least an attempt is made to consistently describe it. It has radium pistols, a whole bunch of other things. So it's not... It has telepathy. It has immortal races. It has all sorts of stuff like that. But it also has lots and lots of science. So I'm counting this as science fiction. I don't think I'm out of my depth at all to do that. And it's definitely my number one. Definitely. There are all sorts of other things that I can include here, especially if I take as writ iSamwise's proclamation that the dividing line between science fiction and fantasy is practically non-existent. If I were to do that, then I could throw in things like The Tales of Alvin Maker by Arson Scott Card. I could throw in the Viraconium novels by M. John Harrison that are only lightly science fiction. Viraconium Nights definitely alludes to the fact that Viraconium in the late afternoon cultures was built on scientific discoveries. There are things in Viraconium Nights that are clearly science, just not understood by any of the people involved in the current day. And there is also an alien invasion in one of the novels that is so surreal you barely notice it's happening. But I could include things like that. That are, if I, as honorable mentions, if I were to adhere to that loosey-goosey definition. But as it is, these are my top 10. And of course, if you're willing, I would love to know your top 10 favorite science fiction. Not the best, but your favorite, no matter what it is, even if it's a Star Wars novel. Although I join iSamwise in saying, take Revenge of the Sith, the novel, out at your library and see if you don't see the difference. You will. In a minute, you will. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. I'll leave a link to his video, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.